You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP. Hello and welcome to Missed Apex MotoGP Podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP fans pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We may not be bike races, but we love it. In what looked to be a weekend of the championship slipping further from his grasp, the rain came to provide Pecco Bagnaia the perfect opportunity to stop the championship rot and keep himself firmly in contention. I am your host, Kyle Power, and today I'm joined in the virtual shed by some fellow MotoGP enthusiasts. We are being joined by Jules Seegers, who is banished back to the co-host seat for doing far too good a job in the host seat. How's it going, Jules?
Thank you, Kyle. Really looked forward to last weekend's races, and I was not disappointed. So fired up to talk about it.
Excellent. We are also joined by our token Northerner, Danny Henney. How's it going, Danny?
Hey, Kyle. Good to be back, and what a championship this is turning into. Fantastic race again.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are also joined by the tyre-obsessed trumpeter, Matt Trumpets. How's it going, Matt?
I said last week the universe was going to send this to the very last race, and I'm glad to see the universe was listening.
It was indeed. So with the universe listening, we'll go into the weekend overview, and Jorge Martin come into this weekend with a 20-point lead over Bagnaia. Marc Marquez and Bastianini are having their own little scrap for third in the championship, but both are well out of contention now. So there's only 4 points separating them, or a few points separating them, but we'll focus on the lead battle here. So going into practice and quali then, guys, Bagnaia was not looking that comfortable. It looked like he was trying some setup experiments on the Friday, Jules. And yeah, he looked a little bit out of sorts.
Yeah, and that was actually a surprise because last weekend he mentioned Thailand and Malaysia as two tracks where he had a lot more feeling and he expected to be a lot better and at ease than he felt last week. But it was almost a carbon copy from the Friday that we saw in Phillip Island, because he went out in the first practice. He came in, he had a lot of discussion immediately with his engineers, with the Michelin guy, went out for a timed lap and then would abort it and do that another time. So it was a bit scruffy, and afterwards he would complain that he did not have the feeling that he was longing for so much. So it was all a bit not convincing, while he really needed to start the weekend off in that kind of fashion. But after all, he came good, and on the Saturday he clinched pole position.
Yeah, Bagnaia was stunning when it come to qualifying, wasn't he? He, like Jules said, I don't think anyone was really putting any money on him watching the practice sessions going into it. Obviously, Marquez was looking stunning. I think the money was on Marquez to get a pole and potentially steal the win. But I think Bagnaia pulled it out the bag when it come to qualifying. His lap time was incredible. And he just looked on it literally from the first lap he rolled out the pits.
Yeah, but this has been a trend of him showing up on a Friday and being completely mid, getting a hold of Martin's settings, and then being much better on the Saturday and even better on the Sunday. The thing that really put him ahead in qualifying was the fact that, unless I've completely forgotten, is that Martin took himself out of it along with several other people.
Yeah, he did. So both Martin and Marquez binned it in quali, and they were both looking like the strongest sort of paced riders that we had, and they absolutely binned it. And just on that Bagnaia pace, they were saying the previous lap record was a 29.2 and he did a 28.7. So we have sort of seen this year half a second faster again, and it was in sweltering conditions as well, Jules.
Yeah, and it didn't look like that would happen at all, because Marc Marquez, I think, led all three of the previous session before we came into qualifying. And then he did his Bagnaia thing of, taking his own approach, riding solo, leaving the pit a lot quite some time before the rest or afterwards, while all the others were just in each other's way. Marquez, Martin, and in the end, Martin and Marquez even crashed, which caused a lot of yellows and didn't help anyone. But Bagnaia didn't have any of such troubles because he was riding solo. And it was such a difference, this confidence he showed with going out like this compared to the Fridays. So if what Matt says is true and he kind of copies what Jorge Martin is doing, he knows he knows what to do once those settings are his.
I don't know. Was that Dutch there, Jules?
Let's keep it to that. Yeah.
Hasn't he been coming out and copying? I'm sure if I got this incorrect, hasn't it Marquez who's come out and said Bagnaia has been copying his settings?
That's Martin.
Is it Martin? Sorry, I must have misheard that when they were doing the commentary because I thought, ooh, that's interesting for next season. Then if he's already starting to pinch his bike settings, apologies, I've got that wrong then. I was just about to say, no, Jules, you got the wrong person.
You wouldn't really want to copy Marquez's settings because apparently he's got such a unique riding style using loads and loads of rear brake that I don't think anyone else can really copy him. And just ask any of the other Honda riders when he was at Honda, just couldn't do anything that he could do on that bike. So amazing quali session, amazing pace and a great turnaround from Bagnaia. So it was like Bagnaia in the end getting pole. Jorge Martin was still in P3, even though he crashed, he was still in P3 on the grid. And Marquez, I think he dropped down to P5. A notable standout was Fabio Quartararo in P6, looking really, really strong on the Yamaha, which is really nice to see again. But they looked like they was nowhere in practice and struggling. So he properly, I think they call it biting the screen, Danny, when he properly just like bites the screen and digs down and pulls a lap out of nowhere.
Yeah, great lap, wasn't it? I want to give a shout out to the Beast as well. Don't often see him up there in qualifying, and what a great position he started the race in, and had obviously an amazing sprint race.
That is a really, really, really good point. Before we get on to sprint review, because Marquez has actually alluded to this in some of his interviews, saying that usually Bastianini starts quite slow and struggles and just gets better and better and better. So he said Bastianini this weekend has started really strong, and that's a bit of a warning. So he's going to be really strong, and that played out to be quite true as we move on for the sprint review. Okay, so going into the sprint review, guys, and there's a few sort of quite major moments in this, and the first one pretty much happened immediately, to quote the great Murray Walker. So Jorge Martin got a great jump off the line and put a really aggressive move up the inside of Bagnaia, pushed them both wide, pushed himself off the track, then comes back on and almost gets collected by Marquez because he's come back on quite forcefully. Marquez says he kind of saw this, preempted this happening, so gave a little bit more of a wide berth, but not that wide. Martin had to close the throttle, and I think he drops back to about fifth. But all of this, it's just like the seas have parted beautifully for Bastianini, and it's just like gone off at the front. And what have we seen so many times from Bastianini that he usually really struggles in the opening laps and then just gets better as the race goes on. So if Bastianini hits the front, that's bad news for everyone else, surely.
Yeah, I think the interesting bit with Bastianini though was he had the pace. Usually he hits the front and he's still a bit slow trying to build into it. You usually see a lot of people have a go at him trying to nibble back, get back in front to control the pace themselves. But he hit the front and he was gone, weren't he? He weren't dropping back. He had really solid pace. Very different ride to what we usually see from him. But yeah, fantastic pace from the start of the race.
Well, and this is what I absolutely love is you saw Martin. If you ask me what he was up to, I think he was less interested in leading the race and more interested in not having Bagnaia leading the race, because that's where the big points differential is. So if he can do anything off the start. Now, I do think he may have had it in his mind that, yeah, I can scoop this. But don't forget, it's a sprint. So your speeds are higher. The environmental temperature was much higher. The track was hot. All of these are going to work in Bastianini's favor, where the general rep that I've sort of picked up over the season is that he's a light rider. He's very kind on tires. So this is going to help him get the tires activated. And I think you saw that play out. By the time he got to lap 2, he had them switched on. And meantime, Bagnaia and Martin and Marquez are all having a battle amongst themselves and much more concerned about each other than they are about Bastianini being off the front.
And Bestia, he said afterwards, I wasn't ready to win because he was like, yeah, my qualifying pace was okay-ish, but I didn't expect to lead this race and to just hang on to the lead. And he said, of course, it's an advantage to be alone in the front, etc. But he surely didn't expect it. And I kind of on the Martin thing, I kind of agree with what Trumpet says, because when Martin explained it afterwards, it almost sounded like he was full focus on Bagnaia, which is understandable, but it made me feel like it was almost that Senna-Prost incident in Formula One in '98. Like, whatever happens, I'm not leaving turn one behind Bagnaia, and because he said, like, I know when he leads, then I'm done. And he said, if I would have not released the brakes, I would have crashed into Bagnaia, and so I released them, and then we went wide, which I think, and we will come to talk about this a bit more maybe, but what I think is he just dive bombed on the inside and see what happens, but he would never have made that pass. So it was, I really thought it put Bagnaia in a huge disadvantage.
For me, I think that was the first time we'd seen Martin use the championship leader card, I'd like to call it. You're out the front, you've got the points. He made a move going, if we both go down, you don't score. It actually benefits me. I think he's been pretty clean all year, but I actually think that's the first time we've seen him go, I'm going to be a bit aggressive here. And if this don't work out, I lose nothing because we're both going out and it's both going to zero score. What actually, because in my favour, I don't think he's a dirty rider, by the way, but I just think that was the first time he's gone, I'm going to risk this, because like Jules said, he couldn't afford to come out behind Bagnaia onto the straight and have him leading, because we've seen what happens when he does.
Yeah, and we've seen that that played out in Phillip Island with Marquez on Martin. So it's a fair shout for all of the riders. In the moment, the gamble is who has the least to lose, and it depends on the situation. I will say, if you watch practice, you did see again Bagnaia having some issues with his launch. And I'm not convinced that it was 100% planned for Martin, but more of I got a great shot and look, oh, now I can really go for this maneuver. I'm not sure he was convinced that would be the case, because sometimes Bagnaia does get a good start.
I think Martin had a better launch, and maybe even better than he expected. But I think he must have had that incident with Marquez at Phillip Island in his mind. But I'm just convinced that he started that race with a battlefield mindset, so to say. Like, I'm not gonna have this something taken away from me again, as if I'm a little boy who's been put in the corner. And I think what you saw in his second attempt, which worked, and he then entered the green and had a track limit warning. It just says a lot about the mentality with which he went into that race to, how do you say this? To explore what the edge is and maybe go a bit over it, and use everything, every tool that I can get and that is at my disposal, and all the limits I can stretch. I'm gonna use them, and it worked.
Yeah, you don't want to get to the end and think, oh, I left without leaving everything on the track. I would just say it that way. I think it's interesting to go back, because TNT was kind enough to replay the 2023 race for us between second practice and qualifying, and I actually watched it. And and I'm watching. I'm like, oh man, what a battle! And then they come up, and there's 5 points in the championship, and there was 20 points in the championship when they started that sprint race. it's a very different year. And I do believe, like just looking at how the weekend turned out overall, that Martin may have learned a lesson or two.
Yeah, maybe. He was certainly getting his elbows out, and I agree with all of your points there. I love Danny's championship leader card played there because it was like, so in my opinion, I think probably like Martin was the one with the most to lose. Bagnaia had to sort of beat him, so you would have thought it'd be Bagnaia being really aggressive. But what we saw later in the race, so Martin dropped actually behind Acosta. He managed to dispatch Acosta. Then he managed to dispatch Marquez, who got absolutely blasted past by Bagnaia on the way through to turn 4, from turn 3 to turn 4. And then he sets off in pursuit of his championship rival. And we haven't seen it much this season. We haven't seen much wheel to wheel or moves of him. It became quite apparent that Martin was pushing really hard, and then it became apparent that he looked like he had better pace than Bagnaia. So I was rubbing my hands of glee. I was like, oh, here we go. And we had a slightly contentious little moment between them. So he sets up a wonderful move, and it wasn't in a traditional place either. And I think the comms on TNT said it was a bit of a mistake from Bagnaia. I don't think it kind of was. I think Martin carries so much corner speed through the sweeping left-hander, shoves it up the inside of the right-hander, makes Bagnaia kind of jump and have to pick the bike up. But this is where the contentious bit happens. So Martin does the move, but then runs off track onto the green bit. Now, as the rules are written, he just gets a warning. You don't really have to drop the position. So I'm going to ask my panel here. Do you think that was fair? And do you think that he only managed to make the move stick because he ran off track? Who's going to go first here? Danny, I'm going to go to you first.
Was it within the rules? Yes, because he's allowed to go off track and get an off track without any penalty coming against him. Is it the only reason he made the move? No. I think he was making the move whether he went slightly off track or not. I think he actually went off because he slightly picked the bike up as he was going through the corner, which sent him off. But it depends which way you look at the sport, really. If you want to go black and white, he went off track, and you could argue, did he make the pass or not? Should he get the position back? But unfortunately, the rules allow you to exploit that to your own advantage. And as good riders do, they take every advantage they can. So, yeah, interesting move.
Well, the thing to me, and I think Danny very much touched on it, is he made that was an impressive move for me. Watching it, I was like, oh my goodness, like that's what you expect. That's the move that wins championships right there. He went off. I think it would have been a shame if he had to give it back, personally, because the intent wasn't to clearly make the move and have to ride off track to make the move. I think it was a result of I've made this analogy before, but when you get like that, it's like playing duets with somebody else. There's no conductor. You're entirely working off of each other for tempo, for intonation, for dynamics, for everything. And I think I agree with Danny. He wound up off track mainly because he was leaving space for Bagnaia to exist at that point rather than to have contact. And so I don't like to see that penalized. If it was a last lap, clearly that does get taken away from you. I think no, I'm wrong about that. Okay. Somebody mentioned it in the commentary. So I thought that's the way the rules were. Okay. I haven't read the rule book. Oh, no, go ahead. Tell me what happens if you do that on the last lap. Do you not get a penalty?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. I wasn't saying you were wrong about that.
Oh, okay. All right. Misunderstanding there. Well, that's good, but it's still good to clear it up because, you hear things on comms, but they're not always correct about things. But I like that it leaves the door open for Bagnaia. He had plenty of off tracks available to him too, and he could absolutely make a similar move. So it leaves it more in the rider's hands and without being unfair to either one. I actually I feel like it's a much fairer approach than possibly other series take.
I'm not sure if Pramac is sending Matt a check after this, but it's a very charming and gentle way of finding words to describe what happened.
Wait, wait.
He was so kind to leave Pecco space.
Is this a disagreement? Are you disagreeing with me?
There's something in both of you guys' points. what I found maybe the least satisfying about this all is that Bagnaia afterwards said like, yeah, but I thought Martin had gone off 4 times, that he had exceeded track limits 4 times, so we just counting on him to get a penalty, and that was what I found a bit of a shame about the pure racing we often get, because if you as a defending rider you get overtaken, and then it's maybe your job to count how many times or know how many times this guy has exceeded track limits to decide, do I need to fight back or is he getting a penalty anyway? It just didn't sit 100% well with me.
That's fair enough. We always, at this level, you're always going to see a bit of gamesmanship. You're always going to see people like dobbing each other in, and miss. He's done that. Look, he's done that. They're always going to grass each other up. Always going to do it. My 2 cents in this is that the move was good. He got the move done. It was fair, as Matt very politely said. He left the room for Bagnaia to exist in this universe, but I think he only ran off track. If you watch it very closely, I don't think he ran off track because of the move. I think he would have stayed on track easily because of the move. I think he ran off track because he just got a bit greedy on the throttle afterwards. He kind of gets off the throttle and then he hits the throttle hard and picks the bike up and just tries to get a mega exit to prevent Bagnaia getting back up the inside. And I think that's why he ran off track. And yeah, Danny, as the rules are written, you're allowed to do that. I don't actually think it was the move that put him off track. So I think the move is fair in my opinion.
Yeah, and I just want to say as well, obviously one of the greatest overtaking moves everybody raves about, Rossi on Stoner at Laguna Seca. Yeah. Rossi made the move and went off track afterwards. Nobody goes back saying, oh my God, he only made the move because he went off track. Everybody raves about it. So although it's not exactly 100% fair, I don't think it made any difference on whether he'd have made the pass or not.
There was also a crazy one with Rossi versus Marquez and Asin at the final corner. Remember where Rossi just lets the brakes off and just completely cuts the corner and it was allowed to stand? Matt, sorry, I cut across you there.
No, that's perfectly fine. You old people go ahead and talk about your memories from years gone by. I'm just going to be stuck into this season because what occurs to me, and I think Jules made mention of it, is that Bagnaia thought he was in for a penalty because he had that moment where he was dangling his front wheel off of the curb over the green. And it was like, it looked for all the world. Even the comms said, oh, that looks like one. And they went back and looked at it. And they're like, we can't really tell. But he never set the sensors off. And I can't believe like just the tightrope act of where he was on the curbs that lap. No wonder Bagnaia thought he was due a penalty.
Yeah, I think it was a fair comment in the end from Bagnaia, because it really didn't, for all intents and purposes, it really did look like Martin had gone off. And I just can't believe I agree with Matt. I can't believe he didn't set the sensors off. That is about as close can be. But what was close was the finish, actually. It all started closing up a little bit. Bastianini escaped off at the front, Martin in second, Bagnaia in third. Bagnaia started to close up again in the last couple of laps, and I think this is Martin riding a little bit tight. And also, with 2 laps to go, there's obviously no mirrors on bikes. They don't really have radios. He wasn't looking behind him. He started defending clear air. The only reference they've got when they go past the line is their pit board, really, and he's saying he's like 0.6 or 0.8. He thought Bagnaia was a whole lot closer than he actually was. So Martin starts to go a little bit defensive when he didn't need to, and then starts closing it off. So in the end, Bastianini comes through to take a sprint win, which is nice to see. It's always good to see him up there. Martin is second and Bagnaia in third, and Marquez in fourth, dropping back. But what was crazy about this, completes a Ducati top 8. The first time it's happened. All top 8, all of the Ducatis top 8s. That is crazy, crazy dominance. But what all this crazy dominance has meant, and Martin getting ahead of Bagnaia with that aggressive move, was the championship lead was up to 22 points as we go into the Grand Prix. So the Grand Prix, wow, a tale of two halves this weekend, really, wasn't it? So it looked like Martin had the measure of Bagnaia in the dry. If all things were dry, it looks like Martin's going to extend his lead again. And for the championship's sake, yeah, that's not great. You want it to tighten up a bit, but the universe played its part, and the heavens opened, and the rain came down. And so the first topic I want to talk about, and we gave Marquez a lot of love in the last race review, quite understandably and very justifiably, but I want to give Pecco Bagnaia a bit of love here, because Bagnaia, to win that race the way he did, not being known as a fantastic wet weather rider, and also in the wet warm-up, wasn't looking particularly happy either, but he said they knew what they wanted to do with the bikes. We've talked about this earlier. I'm wondering whether he just copied Martin's settings, because Martin was looking really quick in the warm-up and happy. So, but Bagnaia, wow, you can't play it cooler than that. To ride home and to rebuff, like you're being attacked by none other than Marquez, having nibbling at you, and that's probably the worst person you want behind you. To keep it really cool, Matt, to go and pull off what he did, I'm amazed. Like, chapeau, hats off.
I mean, and I know today's theme is perfect Pecco, and he deserves every last kudo we can hand him. However, watching the 23 bike versus the 24 bike in the dry, even at the level of wet, because this wasn't the race where it was started raining and got slippery. That's Marquez's real wheelhouse. Everybody was on the wets. Everybody knew this was coming. And he fundamentally wasn't really on a bike that was ever going to be that close. The fact that it was close was impressive. But I agree, if there's anyone you don't want behind you in the wet, it's going to be Marquez.
It was a great battle, wasn't it? And just to reiterate what you said, Carl, for me, I've used this a lot of the season with Pecco, sorry. Champions ride again. Didn't put a wheel wrong. I can't remember him making a mistake in the race. Held up to the pressure from Marquez. And Marquez was making some aggressive moves. Them two moves he put on him was from quite a bit back. I actually thought Bagnaia was just going to sit up and go, no, don't want any of this. Got too much to lose. But give him his due. He fought back, stayed at the front. And yeah, faultless. Absolutely faultless. He put in the ride he exactly needed at the exact right time.
That's exactly that, Jules. Like, Bagnaia didn't really have much choice. He had to beat Martin here, really. He absolutely had to beat him to take some points out of him.
Yeah, and what I maybe found most impressive about his Sunday race when it finally got on was the way he somehow mentally found himself going about it as he did, because he struggled on the Friday. Then he gets a high setting a pole record. Then he gets absolutely dominated by Martin on a Saturday sprint. It starts raining. His warm-up doesn't feel good. His actual start of the Sunday race was not good. He was in fourth position after turn one, and he was kind of lucky that Bastianini and Marquez came together, which handed him P2, and then he went off to Martin. But he had quite a few mental blows, not to mention even last week Phillip Island, and then with all this pressure to do it in the way he did, and to withstand those Marquez attacks, because they were vintage Marquez. I'm going to send it on the inside here, and you figure out wherever you end up, but I'm here. And because I rewatched both of those attacks, and both of them, he wasn't holding that apex. He wasn't closing that corner. And I think maybe all of the riders except Martin and Bagnaia would have yielded, but Bagnaia wouldn't have any of it, and he just really went for it. And I think that was really impressive, especially given these circumstances.
I think the key word, you mentioned it there, Jules, is pressure. The pressure that Bagnaia must have been under in them conditions to beat Martin. One mistake, you've lost the championship, and it's pretty much unrecoverable from there. But I think you put in an hell of a drive. And I have to say, he's probably, in recent memory, one of the best riders I've seen who can cope with pressure. Very rarely do you see him make a mistake when he's being hounded by the rider behind. Just again, super, super impressive. And, hopefully he can keep it going to the end race.
What did you say, Danny? Did you say drive and not ride, you naughty boy? No,
I didn't say that, did I?
It was an amazing ride, Matt. To keep under that, and the opening battle between him and Martin as well was pretty ferocious.
Yeah, and this is like I used to have to do auditions, walk in by yourself, play for people behind a screen to try and win a job. And I can tell you that if the person before you absolutely screwed up, you felt a lot more confident walking in there. And I'm going to say that, yes, the pressure, yes, Marquez, but watching Martin struggle the way and make the mistake he did, I'm pretty sure by the time we got to about lap 3, he knew he had the package to win the race. And so that for your mental confidence in a situation like that, and a high pressure situation, that is everything. That is such a huge, because you don't know, and you're under that pressure, and then you're like, oh yeah, no, they're on the ragged edge, and I'm still fully under control. I got this.
That's a really good point, because let's not forget, Martin storms off. After that first sort of battle with Bagnaia, Martin takes the lead and then starts to clear off into the distance. And I think I remember putting in our group chat, I was like, I can't believe Martin is pushing this hard. You would have thought, as Danny said earlier, the champions lead, the championship leader card, but then that works inverse when you're sort of leading, particularly in the tricky conditions. You tend to tighten up. We've heard a lot of ex-riders say this. You tend to ride stiff and tight, and you need to ride nice and loose in the wet. And he storms off, and I was like, surely not. Martin's just going to put in a dominant rider, surely not. But he makes that mistake into turn 3, goes really, really wide. And I was watching between my fingers. I thought he was going to tuck the front, because he's still trying to drag the front brake in, lean over and go over the paint. And it's like, oh, surely he's going to slide off. So he drops back, and surely then that's just gives Bagnaia the confidence. And he just had to dig deep, but it was so treacherous. And they both alluded to this after the race, that the pace was insane in those conditions. The pace was insane, especially going into turn 5. That's fearsome. That's fast left-hander. And they were both almost tipping in on the white line going in. And we saw Martin start to make mistakes. He started to look a little bit ragged. He started to run off on the curbs. And it was like, oh, right. Like he must have thought to himself, it was like, calm it. Like, seriously, calm it. Because like Jules, I thought he was going to throw it down the road on 2 or 3 occasions.
So did I. He was storming off so aggressively, really. And after that tangle with Bagnaia after turn 3 on lap 1, when they in the wet, side by side, storming off to that turn 4, I thought that was incredible guts. And indeed, they said afterwards, I think it was Martin that said, people don't understand how high the level is that we are riding on here, how fast we're going. And it must have been a scare for him when he lost it in turn 3. Bagnaia passed him. You could already see Bagnaia was closing in on him, because the lead that Martin had built up, it was disappearing within a lap or 2, and Bagnaia was feeling a bit more confident, it seemed. And you could see Martin entering turn 3, too much speed, going wide already, and then he even had to go past that blue area, the blue paint area. And from then on, I think he must have thought like, okay, if I can salvage this race and second position, it's final. P3 it was then. And he, even when Marquez crashed out of that race, he said like, I almost lost it myself. And you could see afterwards how relieved he was, and he like celebrated as if he's won almost. But I thought what was most telling was Bagnaia's response. He was so relieved as well. And afterwards he said like, as far as the race is concerned, he said or in terms of the championship, it doesn't matter that much, because the points he made up won so much points. But he said on the mental side, it's so important for me, but also for him, he added. meaning Martin. Like he knew that that it was finally his turn to deal a mental blow.
Bagnaia broke him, didn't he, to be fair? Once he got in front of the pace Bagnaia was running, for me, I thought Martin tried to go with him and Bagnaia just broke him. He pushed as absolutely much as he could. And actually, when you look at the race for Martin, it was a scruffy race. He didn't really ride that well. You know, he started quite well, but once Bagnaia got in front and he tried to go with him, I mean, I lost count of how many times he went off track. He went off track, I think, was it turn 5? At least 2 or 3 times trying to push. Yeah. Really loose. The back end was all over the place. So, yeah, for me, I think Bagnaia just put the pace in and absolutely destroyed Martin mentally. And then, like you said, I think later on you saw him actually realise this ain't worth pushing for anymore. I'll settle for the points and I'll live to fight another day.
And to me, that is everything. Like you say, he destroyed him mentally, but I think the opposite is true. I think Martin realized from a championship maths point of view, all he's got to do is finish second the rest of the season and he wins. But that means he does have to get across the finish line. And he started out, I mean, you could call it rider skill. I know they have slightly different packages on the bike. Maybe Bagnaia's package worked better in those particular conditions, but it was very clear in those conditions on the Sunday, Bagnaia had pace that Martin did not. And Martin was the only rider to be within shouting distance of Bagnaia, which says everything about where this championship is right now. It is the 2 best riders duking it out for the ultimate prize at the end of the season. And that decision, and he said as much in the interviews after the race, that decision was, he's like, I tried to go with them. I thought I had the pace, but at a certain point, I realized that no, in fact, I don't. And accepting the maximum your bike and the track will give you on the day is key to winning championships. And that's what we did not see from him last season.
Yep, totally agree. And I think the pivotal moment we saw from Martin was when actually, Marquez went down. When Marquez went down, if you look at the Martin onboard, he had a whopping front moment, very similar to Marquez's, and saved it. And it's rare. We used to Marquez doing these crazy front end saves. We saw Quartararo pull one off in qualifying, which is amazing in Q1. But generally, it's usually only Marquez he kind of pulls these saves off, and we not used to seeing Martin do it. And he had probably the biggest front end moment and save I've ever seen him have. Pulled it off, and I think right then and there he was like, right, just gonna pull this home into second. Just get it home. There is no point. And yeah, you're right, Matt. He basically can be bridesmaid for the rest of the season, but it was crucial for Marquez there to go down because if Marquez hadn't have passed Bagnaia, then Martin's losing a handful of points, and then he can't be bridesmaid for the rest of the season. Then, so that's absolutely crucial. But we'll move on in a minute then. But basically, I just think amazing by Pecco. He kept his cool and has whittled that championship lead down to 17 points now. So it had gone up from 20 to 22 down to 17. So a 3-point gain. But as Jules said, it's the psychology of it all. He dug down and he needed to do that. He absolutely had no other choice but to do that. So massively, massively impressive and worthy of all the praise that we have given him. So there is somebody else I think is worthy of some praise as well. If we move on to our second topic here. Pedro Acosta. How cool was it to see him finally finish a race? But before we give him too much praise, I'd like to accost him a little bit. Excuse the pun, that wasn't completely intended. In the sprint, he bins it in the sprint again. He looks leery, carrying way too much speed into turn 3. It was absolutely crazy. We've seen similar, like Marquez do similar things on the GP23 versus the GP24. Maybe Acosta's trying to make up the differences in the bike, but binning it in the sprint, I think that would have made it 5 or 6 consecutive races that he's binned it in and he hadn't finished, like including the sprints. So, we forget he's a rookie. He's amazing. I think we hold him to higher standards now, like because he is just such a prodigious talent. But I even saw an article. I don't know what side it was, but there was an article on, should Acosta start questioning his approach because he keeps crashing. So then to pull off a Sunday in the wet as a rookie like that, Danny, wow.
Yeah, it was an incredible ride from him, wasn't it? I mean, just going on his talent, we see this a lot with a lot of young generational talent, should we say, coming into it. They're all rapid out the box, but a lot of them are very ragged early on, and a lot of them do get questioned of, are they too aggressive? Are they trying too much? And I think, as we said before, it just comes with experience. A lot of us who have raced, irrelevant of what it is, all start off the same, don't it? You hit there, you're very eager to prove your point. You're very eager to mix it with the big boys. And as you slightly get older and a bit more experience, you start to understand that it's the whole weekend, the whole race that actually matters, not just a few quick laps at the start. But it was incredible. Bit of a slow burner, I'd say, but certainly brought some excitement to the end of the race. And yeah, what a battle with the rest of the riders on track.
Yeah, see, and to me, like the watching him go down there, because he was the only KTM in a brace full of Ducatis. I think he just forgot what bike he was on for a minute. And maybe part of that is because he's got this budding bromance with Martin going on, which I know, which I'm actually glad about, because whenever the comms talk about Martin, they're like, oh, he keeps to himself. He doesn't really have any friends in the paddock necessarily. He knows people. But so I think it's always good to have like someone you can vent to or chill with, or, share outside of the team structure with. But I know Danny might feel different.
No, I'm just laughing because you say about Martin and Acosta get on and the commentary. Oh, yeah, he's really nice. Everybody likes him. It's just total opposite to when you see Marquez get on the screen and all the commentators ever say, yeah, him and this rider don't get on. Him and this rider don't get on. Yeah, him and this rider don't get on. No matter who he comes up with, it's always, yeah, they don't get on. So it's actually a nice thing to see. Acosta has made quite a few friends in the paddock.
Well, I think it's because everybody has respect for him. But for me, like, he's on a bike that is clearly not at the top of the pecking order. And the only way you're going to find those corners that the engineers need to know about to fix is by putting the bike where he puts it. And then you can say, well, yeah, I expected the bike to be able to do that, and it didn't. And they can go like, okay, there's an area we can fixate on and maybe make some improvement in. You don't find out what's wrong with a bike till you take it to where he's taking it right now. And so I think he's just generating an enormously useful amount of data for the KTM people. And but the price of that is, sometimes you exit sideways onto the runoff, into the gravel trap, instead of across the finish line.
And the thing is that makes it maybe even more remarkable is it was his first wet race in MotoGP. And entering the weekend, nobody even knew if he was going to be fit to ride because of his crash in Phillip Island, which dislocated his shoulder and it popped back in. And anybody who's experienced anything like that knows how uncomfortable that is, let alone racing.
The sound it makes, I'm just going to say.
Yeah, let's not do this. But so it wasn't even certain he was going to race, and they were going to check him out on the Friday practice. But to do something like this, I mean, rightfully we applauded Bagnaya for his display, but the way Acosta went about it, once he had figured out, because he went off in third lap, I think, in turn 3, where he also crashed on in the sprint. But then once he had figured out the bike in these conditions, it seemed like, okay, and there he goes. And while the KTMs, Miller and Binder, looked far away at one point, it was almost like, oh, I'll look again, and there he was already on their rears.
Yeah, it was crazy. That mistake into turn 3, it's not like you've just slightly missed your braking point. He went in there about 40 kilometers an hour faster than everyone else. Like, I thought he was going to harpoon Marquez, I think it was. He flew in there, and just the spherical objects on the boy to take those risks into corners and to do that is absolutely incredible. Yeah, to stay on it. And that wasn't his only one he had. So he flew off track. He also had his very own massive lose the front end, pick it back up off his knee. And I think it was in the Marquez and Martin corner as well. That same corner seemed to be rife for it. He also had like a massive save. So that lost him a load of time, and he ran off track doing that. And as you say, the factory KTMs, the big boys, the boys who should be beating him week in and week out and sometimes can't seem to get near him, were quite far away in the distance, Danny. And he closes back all that time and locks horns with Miller in a fantastic battle.
Yeah, I was just about to say, what was symbolic for me in that race from Acosta, he made Jack Miller at the end of the race look, not, I wouldn't say amateur, but not as good as what he is. Miller is arguably one of the best riders on the grid in the wet weather. Just an unbelievable rider. And the battle the two of them had was incredible. But Acosta just made him look like he was a normal rider, I'd say. And I think there was a shot when he first started getting his pace closing in on him when he was just behind Binder. And for me, it was a real statement of intent to Costa saying that if you don't think I'm the number one rider at KTM, I'm going to show you that I am. And he just proceeded to put on a show to the end of the race. And I think without a doubt now, he is the number one rider within KTM.
Oh, it must be. And nothing shows it better than that move he put on Miller, braking so much later around the outside and lays it across him onto Jack Miller. It was just like, I was shouting. I was like, nah. I was like, that's absolutely outrageous. Again, this really reminds me of Rossi when he first come in. He was doing these crazy moves. It's like, surely that's not possible. Marquez, when he came in, he's definitely got the Rossi and the Marquez about him. Like, definitely, like, this is a generational talent, like, coming in. And it was absolutely amazing to see him do this. Unfortunately, Binder kind of had a huge mistake and took himself out of the equation. So, yeah, to get Miller, and just a little nod towards Miller sharing the meme on Twitter and aimed it at Pedro Acosta with the Michael Schumacher in the pit lane 98 Spa, which is actually amazing. Really good sense of humour, and super happy that Jack's going to remain on the grid next year, because what a character he is. So we'll wrap up on Acosta now, because that was just what an incredible ride, and it was nice to see him. And as Jules said, the boy's injured. The boys, if you've ever had shoulder injuries, I've had them myself, they are horrendous, and he's injured in doing that. So I love the bravery he has as well, because you're injured, you got a dodgy shoulder, you don't want to chuck it down the road, and he's just putting everything on the line and doesn't seem to care. It's take brain out and just go for it. Absolutely incredible. So there's a few more people who were going for it as well, and we'll move on. And we'll talk about Fabio Quartararo. Awesome save in qualifying. Brilliant qualifying to get to P6. Was up, I think he was in like P3, P4, Jules, was he, or P5 maybe, and he was setting up, the race was looking good, and we're like, oh, come on, like, finally we can get to see Quartararo. The rain is a good leveler of machinery. He's at quite a big disadvantage on the horsepower, but one thing I was surprised to see them in the wet was Yamaha have got a chronic lack of rear grip at the moment, but it seems to be working. And then, well, this sets up a good game of whose fault is it?
Whose fault is it?
Because poor old Quartararo's coming in to the corner, and an intercontinental ballistic Morbidelli turns up going for the apex and just absolutely, in my opinion, just punts him off. A really bad move, Jules.
It was a horrendous move, as one of the commentators I heard said, and it was not only so ill executed by Morbidelli, who I always like to think of as a nice guy, and they were teammates last season, not to forget. But it was just such a shame for Fabio, because he was running fourth indeed. He was leading the group behind Martin Bagnaia Marquez. And in these circumstances, it would have been great. And maybe, who knows, after Marquez crashed, that he could have ended up on the podium. Although with this Acosta nearing in the ending phase of the race, probably not. But it was just such a shame. Also because he had been pretty fast all weekend. It was all very close. On Friday he was up there. On the Saturday it seemed like, oh, maybe he's gonna get into the top 10, and it didn't work out that way. But it was just such a shame, because every time when the cameras catch Quartararo, and I don't know if you guys have that as well, it's just like, it's such a shame Yamaha, but also such shame that this guy, this rider, a world champion, as we all know, is just not in the mix, and it could be so good if he was.
Well, I mean, you know, you're going to ask me whose fault it was. And well, this doesn't require calculus. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah. It's Morbidelli just mistakenly assessed the situation. If you want to be very polite about it, he just thought, you know, you just like, and like, I understand that, like, it's so tantalizing, that gap right there. And you just mistakenly assess it. And then, well, oopsies, sorry about that, but it's only a Yamaha anyway, so who cares? But I want to make the larger point here. In the last weekend or two, we've seen both the Honda and the Yamaha suddenly like starting to do things. And this to me says that the concessions are working the way they're intended. And so just a little chapeau to the sporting organizations for wrangling that and letting them come back to the front and begin to get the value out of the series that's going to keep them in it, because that's really important too.
That is a very, very good point. And also a little chapeau to the rest of the manufacturers to actually agreeing to this as well. They all, for the good of the sport, agreed to it as well. You know, to let them have this and it's good. And that Yamaha V4 cannot come quick enough. Yamaha are developing a V4. We might see it midway through next season hit the track, which would be amazing. They could start with an inline 4, and if they switch to a V4 in the middle of the season, I think that would be unprecedented to change a engine configuration in the middle of the season. I would love to see that. So that would be amazing, and hopefully they can also get it, you know, because the engine configuration will be different. It means they can change the chassis and also maybe solve some of that chronic rear grip issues, because you know, you got Quartararo, what a brilliant talent, and yeah, we're almost seeing it being wasted because he just doesn't have the equipment to compete, and that's really, really out of order. Danny, is there any reprieve for Morbidelli in this? Well, what do we call it? Bludgeoning, a harpooning? Is there any reprieve for him whatsoever?
No. I usually I usually go with the aggressive rider. I don't mind a bit of banging, should we say, when they're doing a pass, but I think he just massively misjudged it. You have to give him a little bit of leeway though, because it is in the wet, the difficult conditions, but he just went for a dive bomb, to be fair, and used Quartararo to make the corner. If Quartararo wasn't there, he'd have just carried straight on, to be honest. So yeah, for me, Morbidelli was 100% at fault, deserved the penalty, etc. What he obviously got. But just to pick up on the Yamaha and the Honda, got to give a shout out to the cameraman. He actually reminded me that Marini was in the race. I saw him. Yeah. I think it's the only time all season I've seen him on track, him and Mir. But it was, in all seriousness, it was good to see them having a battle and get a bit of TV time. And as you say, hopefully they can get closer to the front, because it just doesn't feel right after watching for years and years and years, and Honda and Yamaha always being at the front. It's just, I don't know what it is. It just doesn't feel right not seeing one of them up there battling. So the sooner they get back to the front, the better.
Yeah, agree. Like almost forgotten what the Works Repsol Honda team that we've seen dominate the sport for so many years actually looked like. It's so weird of their livery. We have hardly seen them at all. So it was really, really good to see them. Just finishing up on Morbidelli here. It is kind of a shame that happened. He got his long lap and dropped back because he was absolutely rapid. He was setting fastest lap after fastest lap. He was so fast, maybe too fast, because he ended up binning it anyway. And I was, oh, for God's sake, he's just punted Quartararo off and then he's just thrown it down the road anyway. Like, what a waste. Like, absolutely what a waste. But maybe, Matt, that's why he was so desperate to make the move on Quartararo, because he was maybe pushing over the limit and knew he had crazy pace and just was desperate to use it.
Yeah, well, that is because you saw him take the penalty. But that is a classic. I'm going to make up the time that I've lost. And that is always a terrible idea. That time that's gone, say goodbye to it, send it some care packages at college or whatever. That time is gone. The only way to maximize what you're doing is to be, especially in that weather, is to just be as accurate as possible with your entries and exits. And if you're trying to make up time, you're pushing those breaking points. And inevitably, you're going to wind up exactly where he wound up, which is on his rear end, sliding out of the race.
Yeah, absolutely. I've said this when I've been coaching people on the sim and stuff like that. I was like, forget about the mistake. It is quite literally behind you. Like, you're just going to forget about it and just move forward and just go. So another person who was moving forward in this race, and I want to give a shout out to, was Digi. Fabio Di Giannantonio in his final race. Danny looks happy about that. In his final race before he goes off to get his shoulder fixed, another one, riding hurt. He says he's having to take painkillers because he can't hold himself in the right position because his shoulder hurts so much. 4th place. And he was super fast. He was smashing in fastest laps as well. Like, once Morbidelli had eliminated himself, like, Digi was super quick. And I think if you give the race another 10 laps, then Digi was getting really close. He was starting to get really close. I think Digi could have maybe put some pressure on Bagnaia. So if only Digi could have started up the grid a little bit more. Absolutely incredible. And so we wish Digi well and hope the surgery goes well and everything. And he'll be back next year on his GP25. For that matter, he is getting the bike. And that's really exciting for someone who is looking out and down and out on his MotoGP career a couple of seasons ago. Like, absolutely amazing. And it's only at the death he found it. So that was quality. The final person I want to talk about in this race, and we're only touching on this briefly because we're running out of time, what could have been with Marc Marquez. I think if he would have stayed on, you just know he would have done something or shoved the move on Bagnaia. You know he would have tried something. He said, like, does 3rd place in the championship matter to you, or does winning another race? And he was like, nah, 3rd place doesn't matter. I just want to win another race.
Yeah, I was so dejected. So to see him, and this is a tale of two things. First of all, it all for the world looked like he had saved that until he encountered that curb. And it's just, I was like, no, it was going to be the most amazing highlight, him pulling that off. And then he doesn't. But also, again, this is sort of, I think, that really held Martin up to the championship flame a bit, because he was, if I'm him and I see Marquez chasing Bagnaia, I'm like, I'm just going to let Marquez do my dirty work for me here, because he's either going to take that place from Bagnaia or he's going to bin it. And either way, I either inherit 2nd place or he limits the points lost that I have to him even more. I don't have to get involved. But once Marquez went, you did see him think, oh yeah, I do need to make an effort here, because also you don't want to get caught from behind.
I would like to put an asterisk with Marc Marquez for this weekend. I mean, that he's great, and we all know that, and we mention that a lot. But I think we should also mention when he does things that we should. I think we should be a bit more critical about it. Thing is, we should be careful not to cover everything he does, also the not so great stuff or the maybe a bit ugly stuff, with like, oh yeah, but this is Marc Marquez, and this is a typical Marc Marquez move. Like we mentioned earlier, the attacks on Bagnaia into T12, turn 12, that he wasn't going to make. And it's just a matter of like, yeah, am I going to bump into him? Is he going to make room for me? And then what he did, the move on Joan Mir, after he picked his bike up again, you can't do that, because, and even if you do that move like he did Jorge Martin last weekend, and there was a lot of room in that turn, and Martin accepted it, and things went on as they did. But what disappointed me in Marc Marquez was afterwards, he didn't say like, yeah, my move on Joan Mir was a bit off, or I misjudged that. He fully believed himself that it was a just move, and he said like, yeah, but I was alongside him when we were on the inside of that corner. We were parallel to each other, and it was just a blatant lie, because you can look that footage, you can look at it, and his front wheel is about where Joan Mir's foot is. So he was nowhere near him. And then to just throw it on the inside and ruin Joan Mir's race, who as a Honda Repsol rider this season would be happy with every point he can get. And he was robbed like 4 places, I think.
It was
the
rough.
way Marquez handled it afterwards, I thought it was a bit disappointing. And as I said, I think we should not cover everything he does with, Marquez.
Boo, Jules, boo. We like a bit of Marquez. Unfortunately, with all true great riders, you have to accept there's the odd time when they lose the plot a little bit. They've all got it in them. They're 99.9% great all the time. And they'll have a bit of a moment. So while I agree on the obviously the incident he had with Mir wasn't great, up to that point in the race, he was absolutely fascinating to watch, where he was going to get the grip. Really disappointing to see that the 24 bike still had a massive advantage on him on the straight, because he would enter turn 1 right on Bagnaia's tail, lose 3 attempts down to turn 3, then have to claw it up on the inside. But I knew he was doing a good race, because even my missus was watching it with me. She never watches the MotoGP, right? I've been trying to get her into it for ages. And even she was sat there going, I hope he wins. He's absolutely on it. It was fascinating. So a great ride, small unfortunate moment. But yeah, what could have been, I absolutely think he would have got past Bagnaia and just took off like a scolded cat. But a shame he hit the deck, which is, again, something you have to accept when it comes to Marc Marquez.
Absolutely. Who needs curbs? Who invented curbs? They're stupid. It would have been the best save ever. Anyway, let's move on. We're running out of time. So we'll do some quick awards, really quick awards. So Rider of the Weekend, I'm going to go first, and Bagnaia for pulling off that win. Incredible. Can't say any more. Trumpets, who is your Rider of the Weekend?
I'm going to go where no one expects me to. And that's going to be Jack Miller for being the other half of the Acosta battle on Sunday. And it was, I'm such a huge Acosta fan, but Miller, like that podium right there. And you just like, as a swan song, you're just like, come on, just give him one thing. But that battle was epic, and he fully deserves to be credited with the other half of it.
Definitely. Good one. I'll always like a bit of Miller love. Jules, who are you going to give some love to?
I'm going to go with Digia, because as you mentioned, it was his last race. And I think it sounds like a very sensible decision to get his up, but to sign off the season in that fashion, in such a race, while having started, I think, P10, something like that. I thought it was great for him, and you could see afterwards how happy he was. And as you said, next season, GP25, I think he could be one of the riders, together with Acosta, who can really have an influence on. They probably won't fight for a title, but they could really influence the points.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard to argue with. Danny, you've just had yours stolen.
So I shall steal somebody else's. I'm going to say Bagnaia was my Rider of the Weekend.
I've already said it.
Who's had Bagnaia? Has someone already had Bagnaia?
Yeah, I started with it.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm not going to have Bagnaia then. I'll have Acosta.
We'll allow it. I'll allow it. It's fine. Let's move on. Moment of the weekend. Jules, what was your moment of the weekend?
Okay, I hope I'm not going to insult anyone with this, but I don't know if you guys heard the MotoGP intro tune, right? With all the riders go. And this time they had a Thai-themed intro tune with flutes. And we all know the meme with when a flute is falsely trying to do the tune of 20th Century Fox, 20th Century, you know what I mean? And I swear to God, when I heard this, when the sprint race was going to happen, I really thought, like, is this a joke? Because the flutes in this Thai theme tune sounded a lot like someone was deliberately trying to hit false notes. You know, I should ask Matt.
It did sound a bit out of tune.
But sorry,
it did sound a bit out of tune to me.
Yeah. So, but it made me laugh, and I thought, let's do a funny one.
I like that. Danny, I'm going to let you get in now so nobody steals yours.
My moment of the weekend was Jack Miller when he was chasing down Jorge Martin and he got the back end out that far. I thought he was going to just grip up and high side him off the bike. So I'm not sure if anyone noticed it, but he was absolutely riding that bike for death. And just a pleasure to see. So, yeah, Jack Miller getting the back out.
I absolutely missed that. Trumpets, what's yours?
It's very tempting to go for the Marquez almost save. But you know what? You know what really stuck with me for the weekend was the move that Martin put on Bagnaia in the sprint. Because, oh man, that literally made me shout out loud on my couch at an inappropriate hour of the morning.
Yeah, yeah, that's hard to argue against. I was going to say Marquez losing the front was the moment of the weekend, but actually for me, it's that Acosta move on Miller into turn 3 running outside. Just outrageous. Hats off. Incredible. So please follow my panel. Danny, where can people get you?
You can follow me on X at Danny Henney F1.
Awesome. Matt, where can people get you?
On any of the socials at MattPT55, except for Facebook, where I'm Matt Trumpets.
Mega and Jules, where can people get you?
You can find me on X, and my handle is just at Jules Seegers.
Brilliant. And you can also follow me at Kyle Power F1 on Twitter. But before you do that, why not follow the show at Mr. Apex Moto on Twitter? That's Mr. Apex Moto, or send us some feedback. We have had some feedback, so there's a very thank you for that. We are taking some of that in mind. So why not send an email at Mr. Apex Moto with a capital M, mrapexmoto@gmail.com. And in these flyaway races, they come thick and fast. We'll be back again next week to review the Malaysian Grand Prix. As always, thanks for listening to Mr. Apex MotoGP.